My name is Cantor Scott Buckner, and I am the Cantor Rabbinic Spiritual Leader of Israel Congregation of Manchester. On behalf of the clergy and parishioners who give of their time, talents, and caring presence all year long, as members of the Interfaith Council of the Northshire, I welcome you. In addition to the Interfaith Council's work supporting our neighbors' physical, emotional, and spiritual needs with programs such as Neighbor to Neighbor, the Manchester Food Cupboard, and the Emergency Needs Fund, we gather in fellowship to nurture mutual love and respect, and to learn and grow at events such as this one tonight, honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. In addition to members of our faith communities and the greater community of the Northshire, I am so pleased to have the staff and students of Long Trail School in attendance this evening. Welcome, all of you. Shortly, we will have the opportunity to learn from our wonderful guest speaker, Tabitha Moore. This event is also a prayer service, which will be led by several of my beloved colleagues. I ask, of what good is prayer? We cannot be sure that it will solve any of our earthly problems. On the efficacy of prayer, I turn to the words of the great Jewish thinker and writer, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a dear friend of Dr. King and an activist alongside King for civil rights. Rabbi Heschel said about prayer, "Prayer cannot bring water to parched fields, or mend a broken bridge, or rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and rebuild a weakened will." I believe the most important words spoken by President-elect Joe Biden the night of his election victory were these words. He said, "Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now." I submit to you that this gathering and all those like it around the country are strong statements by good people that we will no longer tolerate hatred, the demonization of the other. Instead, we seek to build this world with love. I invite you to join with me in the following song, which carries this most important message. It begins in Hebrew, but then continues with English words, and you'll get the hang of the melody. And there's also nonsense syllables, which we call a nigun in Hebrew, that accompany this. The song is Olam Chesed Yibaneh. We must build this world from love. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yalalai, Dai, Dai, Da, Da, Dai, Dai. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yalalai, Dai, Dai, Da, Da, Dai, Dai. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yalalai, Dai, Dai, Da, Da, Dai, Dai. Olam Chesed Yibaneh, Yadadai, Dai, Dai, Hadadai, Dai. Sing along from all of your places, wherever you are. I will build this world from love. Yadadai, Dai, Dai, Dadadai, Dai. And you must build this world from love. Yadadai, Dai, Dai, Dadadai, Dai. And if we build this world from love, ya-da-dai, dai-dai, da-da-dai, dai, then God will build this world from love, ya-da-dai, dai-dai, da-da-dai, dai. Olam chesed ibaneh, ya-da-dai, dai-dai, da-da-dai, dai. Olam chesed ibaneh, ya-da-dai, dai-dai, da-da-dai, dai. And if we build this world from love, ya-da-dai, dai-dai, da-da-dai, dai, then God will build this world from love, ya-da-dai, dai-dai, da-da-dai, dai.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Clark, and I serve as the pastor of the Federated Church of East Arlington. And tonight's prayer is one that comes from, many of the words came from a speech of Dr. King's delivered at the Alabama State House back in 1965. So join me in prayer. God of righteousness, grant us your life-giving presence. Guide us in our time together tonight and remain with us as we step out into the world, that we may face injustice with courage and love. May we come to see that the end we seek is a society at peace with itself, a society that can live with its conscience. The timing may feel off. The end of the road might be out of sight, yet we trust in your holy presence. How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you still reap what you sow. How long? Not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. How long? Not long, because you are our God, and all may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. I'd invite us now to take a moment of silence as those who were in Washington just a little while ago did, and many of us rang bells a little while ago too, to remember and honor the 400,000 Americans who have died from the coronavirus. Let us pause in silent prayer. Amen.
Good evening, friends. My name is Chris Heinz, and I am the interim pastor at the First Congregational Church. And it is my honor to welcome and introduce Tabitha Moore to you this evening. It's really a pleasure to have Tabitha here with us. She is a leader in this state. She is a sixth generation Vermonter. I'm not sure there are many of us here tonight who can say they're sixth generation Vermonters, but Tabitha is a sixth generation Vermonter. She's a mother, a daughter, a spouse, and a self-described social justice warrior, and that indeed she is. She is a training coordinator at the University of Vermont. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. She is founding president of the Rutland area branch of the NAACP, and she recently retired from being director of the NAACP there. She is a member of the Vermont State Police Fair and Impartial Policing Committee, and a member of the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council's Fair and Impartial Training Committee. And until recently, she was a neighbor of mine here in Wallingford, and her daughter was a schoolmate of my daughter. With her daughter, she enjoys making chocolates, she says. So I welcome Tabitha here this evening, and she will speak for a while. And when the time is right, we will welcome questions. And actually, you can submit your questions through the chat function in Zoom, and I will moderate those questions for Tabitha to respond to. So welcome, Tabitha. We are so pleased to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's great to be here with you. I am going to share with you hopefully share with you my presentation so that you can see some of the quotes that I will be reading to you tonight. And hopefully I can speak and click at the same time. We're about to find out. But good evening, and thank you so much for having me here tonight to celebrate, commemorate, grieve, and honor the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I got to admit, it's been a while since I've given a proper speech. And as some folks already know, part of that is because my family and I went through quite a bit of racial harassment in 2020. And, at some point along the way, I had to retreat into myself and take stock and think about my next steps. I realized that I was not, in fact, all right. And that rather than pretending to be some stoic leader who never reveals the personal impact of the work, I should honor my foremothers with an honest assessment that integrated all of myself as a biracial Black woman, sixth-generation Vermonter, a newly divorced person, a soul wandering the earth, making connections in the time of a pandemic, and perhaps most importantly in the moment, in my role as a mother. I often joke with my 3 kids about how I never intended to have children. And they usually ask me the story of their birth at least every couple of months. And I don't know why, they never seem to get tired of it. But I think it might have to do with the fact that every conversation, every time we talk about it, it ends with me reminding that, in the words of the painter Bob Ross, that those were the happiest little accidents that ever happened to me. I explained to them how each one taught me something different. My eldest taught me that I have the capacity to love more deeply and fully than I motherhood. My son taught me that I can love absolutely, and that rather than feeling fatigued, that it only energizes me more the more I love. And my youngest daughter taught me that love is multidimensional. It can be bright and energizing, like a playful dance party or a makeup spa day, or it can be slow and calm and meditative, like when she first wakes up in the morning and lays her head on my chest and we just breathe together, appreciating when our hearts beat in time with a knowing smile. Hadley, that's my youngest, taught me that love is, in a word, alive. So as I reflected on these gifts that my children have given me, these lessons about love, while I was in that moment during last summer's barrage of hate, I really can't think of a better word to describe it yet. I realized that the best thing I could do was to be honest and faithful to their love. I know we're here tonight to honor the legacy of Dr. King, but let's be real. There's a saying in the Black community, I don't know if many of you have heard it yet, but if not, this is something you should know, that the man may be the head of the house, but women are the neck that turns the head. So in this moment of reflection, I remembered a Black feminist scholar, Bell Hooks, saying, all too often, women believe it is a sign of commitment, an expression of love to endure unkindness or cruelty, to forgive and to forget. In actuality, when we love rightly, we know that the healthy, loving response to cruelty and abuse is putting ourselves out of harm's way. And so I took myself and my family out of harm's way to reposition ourselves, because even when I try to ignore it and just live my life as people tell me to do, racism is still there. Hate is still there. So I can never actually be free of it. And this is something that my brown and Black family in the audience, I don't know, there might be like a couple. I thought I saw the Reverend James Mills hop on. Hey. You know what I'm talking about. You can't be in it or stay too deep in loving, deep loving relationships with everybody. And that is perfectly fine. So please remember that as we move through tonight and every night moving forward. Leading with love does not have to mean staying in situations that will kill you, so that one day we may see peace, and freedom. Let me repeat that. Leading with love does not have to mean staying in situations that will kill you so that one day we may see freedom and peace. Because self-love is a kind of love too, isn't it? What energy do you have to love anyone else if you haven't properly, consistently, and righteously loved yourself? So I hope you are all taking time to center self-love along your journeys. If you're going to lead with love, start by leading by example and love yourself. That is my urge and my wish for my Black and Brown family, my Indigenous family here with us and in the greater world. But I know that that's really hard, isn't it? Not just for us Black and Brown folks, but for all of us to lead with love, especially when we're afraid, and especially when we see so much hate and so much violence. Leading with love is hard in a good year, let alone the complete dumpster fire that was 2020 and seems to be happening so far in 2021. But we have to try. In an earnest moment, Dr. King said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." And I think it's probably pretty fair to say that what we're witnessing over 2020 and 2021 falls firmly into that category. And as we look around us and we see what surely feels to be the destruction of humankind, I invite you to reflect on how you're feeling in this moment. And as you reflect, I hope that you are feeling as disappointed as I am. That may sound confusing, but check in with yourself. I'm sure that you can easily identify feelings of shock or sadness or fear and even anger. But what I really want to know is, are you disappointed? Because Dr. King also said that there can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love. So if you tell me that you are deeply disappointed, you must have great love. And from great love comes great hope. And we know that where there is hope, there can be evolution and inspiration. So the next thing I urge you to do is peel back the layers of fear and pain and fury and righteous rage to see your disappointment in our fellow humans. Understand that all you feel can be traced back to that deep disappointment that we could be so heinous and so horrible, so mean and so hateful to each other and to the earth. And feel that deep disappointment and know that it cannot exist without equally deep love. And then I want you to channel that love into hope and the hope into action. If you're not white, or as I like to say, you are blessed with the melanin, I want you to channel that love first into self and into other brown and Black people, because you need it and we need it desperately right now. If we are to survive white hate, we must surround ourselves with love. Speak the language of love, breathe in love, and drench every thought, feeling, word, and action in love. And white people, you really need to work on this too, because people don't hate unless they feel all kinds of deep insecurity, even if they are completely detached and unaware of that insecurity's origins. Generations of norming whiteness have made this connection invisible, especially when it looks like white folks have all their collective stuff together, because our society operates based on white supremacist norms that make it easy to appear as though you are all right. White people indeed are not all right. So white folks, you have a lot of work to do, because expecting brown and Black people to solve racism is like expecting the earth to solve global warming. We can do it, but it won't end peacefully, as Dr. King and Gandhi and all the other greats have urged us to do. And let me say that again to you in another way. Everyone wants to preach nonviolence and sterilize the words and legacy of Dr. King, especially this week. But let us not forget that he was assassinated. He was one of the most hated people in the country at the time of his murder. So on this day where we uplift him, let us not perpetuate the whitewashing of history. He was murdered because he believed that a nonviolent solution to racism must be found. He was murdered by white folks. Never forget that. And let's not pretend that murdering those who fight for racial justice ended with his assassination. Darren Seals, a major leader of the Black Lives Movement, was found shot to death in a burning vehicle in 2016. And we know that physical death is not the only assault Black and brown and Indigenous folks face when we dare to stand up, to speak, and to lead. And as you continue your reflection, I want you to consider these words from the amazing Rabbi Joachim Prinz. When I was the rabbi in the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime, I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned under those tragic circumstances was that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problem. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. So while book clubs and Netflix documentaries are useful, if not a critical component to decolonizing our minds and reintegrating ourselves with the knowledge of the full story that was omitted from our high school curricula, there's so much more that you can be doing. So I have a few tips that I want to share with you. And if any of you have been watching me on social media, you've probably seen a few of these come out in some spicy ways. Oh, where'd they go? Here they are. So tip number 1, stop being surprised. If you're paying attention and you have any idea how white supremacy works, you would not be surprised. So it's a really good idea to stop telling your Black, Indigenous, and people of color friends how shocked and sad you are. Because when you do that, all you do is reiterate that you're white and that you haven't had to pay attention. So number 1, don't be surprised, because when you're surprised like that, it makes it harder to do the rest of the steps. Number 2, create real systems of accountability. Don't limit it to dialogue. How will you ensure that your place of work, your school, your place of worship do the work of reparations? Because that is what is at the heart. That is what is at the center of beginning to bridge the gap. It's reparation. Create a real system. And for that, I would suggest using restorative justice as a template. Number 3, center this work as critical to your work. When COVID-19 hit, everyone could all of a sudden put all kinds of measures into place as part of the regular work day and ways of going about the world. Temperature scans are suddenly everywhere. We've got hand sanitizer. We're giving things away for free, including masks and food. We can all of a sudden, we can forgive people who are late on rent. All of these amazing changes, even how we educate, how we have structured our work days, everything, how we're worshiping, right, has all changed on a dime, because we recognize the pandemic, the threat to life that is COVID-19. We need that same level of commitment, that same level of panic, of knowledge that this racist epidemic is killing everyone. So just because you're not dying yet doesn't mean that we aren't, and doesn't mean that you won't. So this work must be centered just as critically as COVID-19 has been centered. Responding to that has been centered in all aspects of your work. Number 4, and this is kind of a really weird one. This happens to me a lot, and this is just one I'd like to put out there for you. It's really weird when white people apologize for all of racism. Like, people are like, oh, I'm so sorry that racism is a thing. Like, I don't know why people do that. And if anybody can tell me, that would be great. But like, who is that happening for? Because I've never asked somebody to apologize for all of racism. It doesn't really help us. Like, what are we supposed to say? Thank you. Like, it's all right, you know, like there's nothing, it doesn't actually serve a purpose. Think about what's really happening. What are you really trying to apologize for at the moment? And is it because you need it? You need to apologize, or because the recipient needs to hear it? Understand where it's coming from before you do it, and think about what the person really needs. So that's just a little one that's been happening a lot lately. Number 5, and I've been saying this one for years, get your cousins. Thing we say in the Black community, for real. Even if they support Trump, I see a lot of my amazing white friends who are out there, they're challenging, they're interrupting, they're doing all the steps that they've been taught to do. One thing that I also see is people saying, I've had to cut off so many people in my life because they're just too toxic. I can't handle it. What a privilege. Because as a brown person navigating this world, I don't get to ever cut off my relationships with white folks. So if you are really going to do the work of racial justice, you must get your cousins, you must stay in relationships with other white people, especially those who are toxic and harmful. Because if you want to know what they're going to do minimally, if you feel like you can't reach them and help them and be with them on their journey as they struggle through these stages of coming to understanding, minimally you know what they're doing. And so things like what just happened at the Capitol might not happen so quickly, because we already know that if white people are going to learn, it's going to be mostly from other white people. It's just, I mean, we learn from people who are like us. And those people who are further along that continuum really are going to learn most from people who look like them. And so it is incumbent upon you, white folks in the audience tonight, to make sure that you stay connected in some form or another. Now, remember, I did say self-love, so you got to love yourself too and take care of yourselves. But remember that we don't ever have a choice. We always have to be in relationship with white toxicity. So do you. If we're in it together, you're going to stay in it. Number 6, calm down. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. We have been fighting this for more than 400 years, okay? And if we go at it with the sense of urgency that some of my white friends like come at everything with when they realize that racism is real, that we're not lying, or that it really is this bad, you will have a heart attack. Okay? And I mean that literally. You really can't have like massive level stress as you're going at it. You're not necessarily thinking as clearly. And again, I see this all every year with the legislature. And to this point, I actually last year just backed out at the end. Like, I can't even testify anymore because you were all so frantic. So if you have friends that are in the legislature, tell them to slow down, because it's more important that you get it right than that you do it quickly. We've been doing things quickly for too long. What matters is that the right people are at the table. What matters is that we're valuing love and relationship and healing and reparation before getting it done quickly. We're not going to stop dying anytime in the next year or two. So if you take 6 months or a year to make sure that you have all of the voices at the table before you create a system of accountability and reparation, great. If that's more likely to last. Okay. And while you're at it, donate. I've listed a few of the places that I prefer, and I think that this will be available after tonight's presentation. But the first group I always want people to donate to is to the Abenaki Nation. Because while we're talking about racism, while we're talking about injustice, there is no greater sin in this nation than what was done to the people who inhabited this earth, this land where we are right now. And for us, it is the Abenaki. So if we are going to make right racism, we must first start by honoring and by naming and by dealing with what we have done to the Indigenous people. So you can donate to the Abenaki Nation. A second group that I really encourage folks to donate to, and it's about helping our youth to be better informed, which they already are, but still they've got some issues too. It's the Vermont Coalition for Ethnic and Social Equities in Schools Act. That was Act 1 2 years ago. You can donate to their mission, which is to create a set of standards for education in Vermont that ensure that everyone feels seen, heard, and is included for their contributions, and that history is reported more in the state of Vermont. So that's the Vermont Ethnic and Social Work with our migrant workers around the state and people who have emigrated to Vermont. And the fourth group, I would never forget my beloved NAACP, either branch. Rutland area branch, big button right on the first part of the page, NAACPRutland.org. Donate, they're doing amazing work. And the same thing with our sister branch in Windham County. So donate, okay? Because I know some people can't necessarily get out and do all of the activism that other people do. I tell you, I've met people that I'm like, I can't even do that. So, and the last thing I want you to remember, and this is for everyone, if you forget everything else that I've said tonight and all of my tips and tricks, because everybody's got tips, is that the only way that racism ends peacefully, the only way that we can ever achieve Dr. King's dream of that nonviolent end to hate is if white people voluntarily start to get it. Because what's going to happen, we've been singing, we've been dancing, we've been giving statistics, we've done everything we possibly can. And this goes back to my point about staying in relationship with other white people. Because if you don't start to get it, we are not willing to continue dying. Okay, so what that means is that we will have to defend ourselves. And people are defending themselves in a number of ways, and we're still dying. But the only way this ends peacefully for any of us, and that's not meant as a threat, that's just a reality. People can only push you so far collectively or individually before that urge to defend yourself physically wells up. So the only way it ends peacefully is if white people get it. So I don't want to leave you on that note. So I want to go back to this fantastic quote, which Reverend Kathy also quoted from earlier. So we're definitely on the same vibe. I hope you remember these moments when you're feeling, this is what I want you to remember when you're feeling stuck and overwhelmed. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, Let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a no and transform yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And I will submit tonight to you that along with Dr. King, our foremothers, Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and Angela Davis, along with every brown and black woman who's ever walked this earth, the force that Dr. King is referring to is the force of love. So please, as you go forth in love. And hopefully I will get to see you on the other side of that arc.
Well, thank you so much, Tabitha. And now I'd like to open up to questions. And if you would submit your question via the chat, and then I will ask it to Tabitha. I guess just to get started, Tabitha, you know, I believe in what you say about that this is not going to end until white folks get it. And we, and I say we as white folks, look at the world through a lens that is so tainted that it doesn't permit us to see things as they really are. And so one of my prayers is that we as white folks help each day we wake up and we ask ourselves, well, what is it, what do we really see? And so I just want to ask you to comment on the different lenses. And oftentimes when I've preached about racism in churches, the response is, oh, well, there's no racism in Vermont. And we know that's not true. Mm-hmm. And it's right here in our neighborhoods. And we as white folks need to be able to open our eyes and see through our own lenses to see that reality, which you see every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that next in importance, next to love, would be curiosity. And so when people stop being curious and start making proclamations about what is or isn't, particularly if that what is or what isn't doesn't directly affect them or their lives, to become curious about how they know that for a fact. How do you know that that's true? What are you talking about? Just your experiences? Have you read any books or turned on the media at all? You know, because that's, you know, people tend to respond better to curiosity when you're drawing them out than when you're telling them, no, these are the facts. These are the facts. That's been my experience anyway. Did I answer your question? If there's more, please add it.
Yeah. Well, I haven't received any questions from others yet. So, you know, I was sitting in my car today listening to VPR and the report about Vermont State Police activities in regard to the disparities between pulling people over, arresting people of color, Hispanics versus whites, and it was dramatic, the difference. And even in Wallingford, there was a case of someone being pulled over just for having snow over their license plate and having their car confiscated. So there is this question that what happened to cause you to move away from Wallingford?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a series of events. And like I said, this is one of my first speaking engagements since everything really blew up in my life. So navigating how much to tell and how much to, you know, just give a flavor is always difficult. But there were quite a few things that were happening, and you know, they were happening slowly since I started the branch of the NAACP, even before. Small little micro cuts in my soul, just, you know, from leaving Mill River Union High School as a school counselor, where there was an educator who would force kids to say the N-word while reading Huckleberry Finn, and like just so many things led me to feel like my home wasn't my home again. And then over the summer, as we were all kind of in COVID lockdown and people were forced to see what was happening in Vermont and around the US, and I continued to speak up, as expected, I became a lightning rod in a lot of ways and received, a number of threats, but it wasn't until I think sometimes we just keep thinking we have to deal with things, but my daughter decided that she wanted to get the Black Lives Matter flag raised in the schools because she'd been doing a circuit of speaking engagements with me as I was going around to rallies and protests. And she's like, Mom, I think it's finally time. I think I'm ready to do it. And unfortunately, there are people in our community who decided that a 17-year-old was fair fodder for their hate and their vitriol. And she was held up as a campaign for one hateful person, Art Peterson, who was elected by our community to represent us. He said that the pride flag was preferred and that the Black Lives Matter flag was equivalent to a Nazi flag. And that just sparked even greater flames of hate across the Rutland area. And I think it was the night that she called me while she was house sitting for me while I was away. And she was afraid that somebody was breaking into our house. And she's whispering to me from the closet, Mom, do you think it's somebody that's mad at me for getting the flag raised? And I had to call the state police who came in and, it turned out that nobody was there. But that was for me, that was a moment that's like, okay, Tab, we're, like you could be out there, you could do a whole lot of things, but when it comes home like that, it really makes you think. And it really made me realize that I wasn't okay. And so through the process of deciding that self-love was the best thing I could do in the moment, we left.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability in sharing that. A question here. We're getting a number of questions, but one is, what do you recommend as a response to white folks using the term woke in a sarcastic, derogatory way?
Again, I'd be curious about it. Tell me, what does that mean? Why are like your facial expression and your words aren't really matching, and I don't really understand what you're trying to tell me right now. Really get them to center and own where they're coming from. And what does that mean? Why are you using that derogatorily? What does that mean to you to be woke? And see where it goes from there.
Yeah. And here, can you talk more about restorative justice, especially as it might be used in schools? What is your advice in this area when a white student really doesn't get it?
Restorative justice is actually a whole structure and system, a way of changing how we do power and authority, not just in schools or in jail settings, but in community and in relationship with each other. And then basically it centers around the idea that when we harm somebody, we need to be called in and we need to be accountable for what we've done, how it hurts ourselves, but also how it hurts other people. And when what I see largely is that schools are not adopting restorative justice as a community philosophy, but as a way of changing things in terms of disciplining kids. But I have yet to see a school that has fully integrated and adopted restorative practices, restorative justice as a way of being. Like I said, they use it typically for dialogue, they use it for kids, it's for them, it's not for me. Whenever you other like that, you've automatically, it's not restorative justice anymore. It's performative.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So as we mentioned in your introduction, you're a sixth generation Vermonter, person of color. How has Rutland County changed for better or worse over your recent memory? And do you feel that the movement against social justice and racial equality is more, the movement against social justice and racial equality is more vocal now than it was, say, 20 years ago?
Yes, it's absolutely more vocal. And there's a few reasons that it's more vocal. Number one, those of us fighting for it are more vocal. We're more present, we're more consistent. Across the globe, the behaviors that we see happening in Rutland County and elsewhere have been condemned. When you look at the fact that the, it's not the United Nations, I can't remember the organization, but it's a national organization, declared that racism in the United States and policing and racism in the United States was a public health crisis, that it is a massive problem. And the US shut that information down by and large. I mean, we only had it reported in a few places like Washington Post. You can see why little bubbles like Rutland still exist, because we don't want to face the reality of what is. I mean, we are so far behind in Rutland County. We are so far behind in a lot of ways, even in Vermont, around what we do to address racial justice. So when you ask me, what is Rutland County like now versus when I left here in 1996, I'd say it's the same Rutland County, but they're just being forced to be more open with their hate. And social media allows us snapshots and views and screenshots to be able to have receipts to say, you remember when you did this? And a lot of us are much more aware. More white people, I will say, are more aware of what we've been saying. So it's not that we have stopped, or we have been saying it even louder, even though we have, but white people are more able to hear us now in Vermont than they were 20 years ago. So Rutland County is probably exactly as hateful as it was back when I was a high school student, but they're getting pushed against and they're not changing with the times.
So that sort of leads a bit into the next question. And that is, it's a question about what we can do to become involved in putting belief into action. And I'm going to tag on to that. So this summer, there was a lot of vocal activity in the Black Lives Matter movement in Vermont, in Rutland, around the roundabout in Manchester, etc. And do you feel that those actions are productive, and do you encourage us to continue to do that? And are there other things that you would ask beyond what you've said tonight?
I do think there's a way in which visible demonstration is a critical part of resistance. It's a critical part of the movement. And I can tell you that we've driven by signs and my kid's like, oh, Mom, what's that? Or, like those things are important. And they do show that, like I said, there is a resistance. If that's all you do, it's not enough. Some of the things that I mentioned earlier, the ways that you are in deep personal relationships with people, the ways that you look to and challenge and try to connect with other white folks so that they start to get it, so that we can have that nonviolent ending to this. Those are all critical steps you can take. You can join organizations like Showing Up for Racial Justice. You can join the NAACP. It is an interracial organization. Membership is critical. You can testify in front of the legislature. You can educate yourself. Like I said, all of these things are necessary. In your workplace, it is critical that you are raising these questions, that you are making sure that racial justice is centered in your workplace. I don't care if you build widgets, educate students, or work in fish and game and wildlife. Everything is intersectional. So it's really critical that you bring that intersectional lens and that you're doing that. So many different places to jump in, and you're not going to get them all. You're not going to get it all right. You're going to screw it up. And here's what I'll tell you. I screw it up all the time. It's just a willingness to be humble and be like, yep, I really did that bad. And I'm going to do it better next time.
God gives us that chance.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Environmental groups such as 350.org are purposely merging environmental and racial justice to bring more awareness to both crises and strengthen numbers. Have you found that this merging is making a change at all in the last year or so? For example, through the Just Recovery Program and the Green New Deal.
I probably haven't been as up on that as I should. I know that the NAACP, we have an environmental justice arm, and actually the Rutland area branch has a seat on the national committee for that because we're Vermont. But what I would say is that, yes, they absolutely must go hand in hand. And eventually we're going to have movements will be integrated with each other. Like the intersection of being Black, trans woman, for example, that is an intersectional identity that we need to be working together around. And environmental justice, if you think about racism and that what racism is used as a tool to do, it's a tool that is used to measure and meet resources, who gets what resources. And one of the greatest resources we have is our environment, is our land, and what our land can yield for us. So you can't extract one from the other. So if you're going to be addressing racism, you have to address environmental inequity and environmental destruction. So I see hope in it, but I haven't had a lot of opportunity to work at the intersection. I mean, we have a little bit, but
not a lot. Our next question: how can people reach across the racial divide beyond joining organizations to get to know each other as people in a white state like Vermont?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that almost sounds like, how do I find Black friends? And I could be, misinterpreting it, but think about what your favorite food is and where does your favorite food originate from? For most of us, our favorite food doesn't come from a country that is ours. And just as we're able to find ways to connect through food, and that's a great way to meet people of different cultures too, by the way, as to break bread and or naan, as it were. That is a wonderful way to try to get to know other people, is to explore cultures that are not your own, to go in with humility and with curiosity and with awe and respect, and get to know people. So if you're here in Vermont, we live in a very small global community these days because of technology. And there are plenty of ways that you can connect with different people online. You can also use Google. You can try to attend a cultural event that you might not normally get to go to, and just start to learn, start to go outside of your norm. That's how you do it. There really is no secret. There's no recipe. Just wander into it and do the best you can.
Yeah, what you just said reminded me that my wife and I attended a Christmas service from a Black church in Minneapolis. And it was a wonderful experience, a cross-racial experience that really allowed us to have an experience we never could find here in Rutland, Vermont.
Yeah. And it's so much easier now, like I said, with Zoom, and now that everybody's connected because of COVID, thanks COVID, right? There are ways that you can pop in on and be part of different communities, especially for those of us who are over 40 and 50 who aren't digital natives. We now have this tool that our young people have used forever. I suggest that you use it. I mean, explore the world in the ways we never could. Yeah, I mean, there was something else I was going to say along with that, but it'll come up later.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Before we move on, I think I can speak for all of us, and there have been about 70 people online this evening that from my heart, a deep thanks for your openness, your commitment, and your willingness to be with us here tonight, and sharing of your story and your passion. We thank you very much. So if there aren't any more questions, we're going to move into our closing part of our program tonight, and I'm going to introduce Skip Dickinson, who is retired minister from the Dorset Church, and he's going to lead us in a closing prayer, a closing litany, which I'm going to display on my screen here, hopefully. All right.
Thank you. And I've been introduced I'm a retired minister and member of the United Church of Dorset. I invite us all to join in this covenant prayer of recommitment to justice. Let us pray. O God, who has created your children to be free, we attest in word and deed that you are our God and we are your people. From our earliest days as the people whom you intend to be free, O God, you have called us forth from self-seeking bondage, from comfort, from complacency, and from complaint, to freeing and redeeming action for justice everywhere in the world. And I invite all to join where we say all. You are our freeing God,
and
we would be your free and freeing people. O God of Exodus and the burning bush, of all the prophets, including Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we hear your powerful calling to be your servants in the service of all those who are oppressed. At every turn, we hear your voice in the cries of the poor, of the hungry, the imprisoned, and the broken. For you made yourself one with those who seek justice, freedom, and peace. We share a vision, a promise, and a yearning for the day of your reign, O God. You are our servant God, and we would be your serving people. O God, our sustainer, search our hearts and reveal to us our sinfulness, all the ways that we contribute to injustice and to self-destroying bondage. Give us, we pray, deep courage to find the true path of your way, ready to give our very selves as living sacrifices for your will. We have heard your calling. Hear us now as we make our pledge. You are our God, and we are your people. We pledge ourselves now to pursue relentlessly that living, breathing justice which transforms persons and peoples. To your will for justice, we recommit ourselves and pledge ourselves, our funds, our actions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you all very much. Music is unique in its ability to bring people together and to heal. Following the murder of George Floyd, in an effort to promote peace through harmony, I participated along with more than 100 Jewish cantors and Black music ministers who came together to produce an interfaith, multiracial virtual video. In celebration of unity, sisterhood, and brotherhood of all faiths, I share this beautiful video with you now. The song is Total Praise, written by African-American gospel artist Richard Smallwood, who is conducting the piece in this video. Enjoy this uplifting and powerful musical project in the spirit of this evening and the legacy of Dr. King.
Mine eyes to the
And now benediction.
Hi, I'm Reverend Rebecca Salmons from the First Baptist Church in Manchester Center, and I'd like to share a benediction with you. It's from Galatians 5:13-15 from the Message translation. It is absolutely clear that God has called you to a free life. Just make sure that you don't use this freedom as an excuse to do whatever you want to do and destroy your freedom. Rather, use your freedom to serve one another in love. That's how freedom grows. For everything we know about God's word is summed up in a single sentence. Love others as you love yourself. That's an act of true freedom. So as we leave this evening, may we embrace this truth that sets us free and invites freedom and wholeness for everyone. Amen.
Amen. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We had a wonderful crowd of people to share in this very powerful evening. Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you to the entire Interfaith Council of the Northshire for everything that you do. Peace to everyone. And go forth and build this world with love. Thank you.